The Tower of Babel is probably one of the most known episodes, descriptions, myths in the Torah, in the Bible. It's really only several verses long. Most of us know the gist. The world was only one language. There weren't that many people around. God started with Adam and Eve. The rabbis, of course, say that language was Hebrew. We'll leave it at that. And they built a tower because they were able to communicate to each other. They were able to work so hard. They said, let's build a tower up into the heavens. And as they got close, God and the angels got scared and said, wait a second. These people are supposed to be mortals, a part of the earth, not part of the heavens. So God destroys the tower. Lots of other midrashim about it. And then scatters them around the earth and confuses Mipabel et Tasafot. And hence we have the English word babble, to babble on, to speak in tongues. What is the lesson of this tower story? Is this a lesson of we did wrong? The rabbis said that they were more focused on the work, didn't treat their workers correctly. If they lost one brick, they were so scared, they said, we can't do it. But if someone fell from the tower, oh well, we got another slave to fill his place. Or should we also say that having multiple languages is something that is rich? By the way, there wasn't an opportunity or a chance in the early 20th century to have a universal language, Esperanto, created by a Jew, by the way, L.L. Zamenhof. I think that the lesson of the Tower of Babel was that humanity was meant to spread through the planet and speak many languages. God didn't want us to go up to the heavens. The world is for us to use. And also because uniformity stills creativity and culture, and that there is something very rich about diversity. Yes, I know it is enticing to think, what would the world be like with just one language? There'd be less miscommunication, hopefully less prejudice. Even last night when we had the Canadian Anthony Housefather, who's from Quebec, talked about the challenges of being in a united country with two official languages. By the way, you don't have to go very far to know the United States essentially has two official languages, English and Spanish. New York City, by the way, has 700 languages spoken in it. Some of them, they're the only place in the world where those dying languages are spoken. I firmly believe that the world is richer and better off because it is multilingual, and we can find ways to hate each other even if we speak the same language. So it's not our different languages that causes the prejudice. So what's positive about language and its diversity? Language is more than straight communication between people. Language transmits culture with it and tradition, memories and values. Language allows us to interact with the world in a rich way, because most of what we're experiencing, we have to use metaphor, we have to use poetry, and there's more than one way to celebrate and to live in this world. There is art to how we speak to each other. Every winter on the first snow, you hear the urban myth that the Inuit, formerly the Eskimos, have dozens of words for snow. They get more specific. Is it wet? Is it slushy? Whatever it is. Why? Because the more specific we can get, the richer it is. If you live in the equator, you just need the word snow. But think about how many words they have for humidity. Soggy, muggy, stifling, whatever it is, schwitzy to use the Yiddish word. Because we need to have different expressions for how nuanced our world that we are in. And by the way, language is also organic. Elon Gilad mentioned to us last week, I'll talk more about that next week, that what makes a language that's spoken, that's alive, it's one that is spoken by its children. Eliezer ben Yehuda was part of the rejuvenation of Hebrew, not just him. He talked about that last week as well. But what was the first thing that he chose to do, and controversial, is when his son was born, he said, I'm only going to speak Hebrew in the house. He knew that if he wanted to rejuvenate Hebrew, his son would kind of have to be the guinea pig, the lamb, whatever you want to talk about it. There's been books written about him. He had to have his son have Hebrew be his native tongue, because it's our children that really carry our language and carry our culture and move it on to the next generation. But we also know that cultures adapt and change. Our children are not exact copies of us. That's why we have multiple languages and why languages change too. Thanks to AI, I was able to get this statement. The traveling lamp is shining. I bethink I shall wend to the beach. Shall thee joineth me? What we can tread on the sand? That was Shakespearean, supposedly, according to AI. What did I want to say? The sun is shining. I want to go to the beach. Will you come with me? We can walk on the sand. You probably got the gist, but you knew that I was speaking a little bit differently than I would if I was just speaking 2025 English. The Jewish tradition is ancient, and of course is adapted to changes as we have crisscrossed the world. Aramaic was our first non-Hebrew language that we spoke, and we even adopted their alphabet, as I mentioned a couple weeks. At each place that the Jews have gone in our thousands of year history, they have melded the Jewish culture with the cultures around them, often resulting in what we call the Judeo languages. For simplicity's sake, we can define the Judeo languages as the taking of the lingua franca of the area, most often writing it in Hebrew characters, and including Jewish idioms. And because it was spoken by children, they're also changing the grammar. The grammar of the Judeo languages are so different that they're not just dialects. I'll use Ladino as an example. Ladino is not just Spanish. Yes, a Spanish speaker might be able to get the gist, but it has its own grammar structure. Yiddish, we say, oh, it's just German. Yes, there's a lot of German in it, but there's a lot of Slovak. And actually, the linguists say there is more French, more medieval French in Yiddish than there is German. They become their own languages. They are the languages of the Jews of where they are. Part of it because they were ghettoized, but part of it is because they maintained their culture. And in order to have their culture, they needed to speak their own language. And Hebrew had gone out of favor at the time. Again, we could talk about that another time. So how many Judeo languages are there? More than you think. Yes, we have Ladino and Yiddish. I'll get back to that in a second. But we have Judeo-Italian, Judeo-Arabic. Sadia Gaon wrote in that, by the way. Judeo-Persian, Judeo-Aramaic, which is different than the Aramaic that must have been spoken by the non-Jews. Judeo-Marathi and Malayalam. These are spoken by the Jews of India. I wish Rachel were here. Some of them in Calcutta, some of them in South India. The Bukharan Jews had their language called Bukhari. And then the Jews of Curacao had Judea Papiamento, which is a Creole language, but they spoke differently and had different borrowed words, more from the Dutch than from the French, which the Curacao non-Jews had. Again, you can have whole PhDs on all of these things. I could also give whole sermons on Yiddish and Ladino, and thanks to Martha Hirsch for teaching us last week some things about Ladino, so I went to go and learn of them. If you want to learn more about Yiddish, you can talk to my mom. There's plenty of out there. There's also the Hasidic world, so I'm not going to let that be. People say that Yiddish was once dying, but it's still thriving, as Elon said last week, because children are speaking it. How about Ladino? Once even had more speakers than Yiddish did, but it seems to be, quote unquote, dying. Yes, fewer children really are speaking Ladino, but we can have a quote unquote dead language, but it still be studied because it is ancient culture or historical culture that we can study. And there are people with PhDs continuing to study Ladino and actually to revive it, at least for those who care, as a spoken language. One of those leaders is Professor Brian Kirshen, who is at Binghamton University, and he is leading a renaissance, especially with the advent of Zoom. He now has a Zoom cadre of people out the world learning and practicing how to speak Ladino. And interestingly enough, he has a cadre of Japanese who want to learn Ladino. And so they are keeping the language at least around and studied and alive so that we can have its preservation of our culture. As Jews, we do believe in the resurrection. There could be resurrections of languages, and we can also say there are time for languages to not be spoken by children. It might be time, and we can talk about that next week as well, for our children to speak Hebrew. Yes, we can teach them some Yiddish words. We can teach them some Farsi words. Those who want to learn it can certainly do so. But if we only have so much time, we have to choose a language of our living culture. And I'm going to say that that living culture is going to be Hebrew. And so next week, I'll discuss on how we can have and celebrate Hebrew, and really all of us have opportunities to advance our Hebrew, to take the lessons of this month. And yes, that does not mean, though, that we are going to kill off Yiddish and Ladino and Farsi and all the languages of our cultural history and ancestry. Aramaic, by the way, if you want to study Talmud, you got to know your Aramaic. And we're not going to kill those languages off, but we're going to make Hebrew the living language of the culture of the Jewish 21st century. Shabbat Shalom.